Good morning. Well, we've mostly got over our our cold
Cooties.
cooties, our
Our
cold
cold
cooties.
cooties.
So we're definitely on the mend, although Marty is mending slower
Yeah.
than, unfortunately, I am. Anyways, so we're going to keep today's pretty short, but we just wanted to, I don't know why this occurred to me the other day, but every once in a while I come across I wonder if people know about this little tip. So did you have a name for it, Marty? Tuesday.
Was a common sense something or
I don't
other.
know. So a lot of these little,
Obviously, the fuzzy mane did not
yeah.
have any
You know how in the middle of the night
rhyming crap or not.
you get a really good idea and you say, oh, I should just roll over and write it down, and then you say, no, I'll remember it. Yeah, anyways, what I wanted to do today is the couple tips that I want to talk about are when you get to the point of quilting a project. Now, again, this is more for small projects. If you have something long-armed, it's really not going to do anything for that. But
Well, your second one does.
yeah, you're right. Okay. Anyways, so the first one I want to talk about is open seams, or seams when you press them open as opposed to pushing them to one side like we are traditionally used to. I am not a big fan of open seams because for many reasons, and that's what we're going to talk about. I can't stand the
Listen to
fact.
the thunder.
Yeah, it's thundering now. I can't stand the fact that, first of all, it takes longer to press that way, I think, personally.
It's a
and it's just
headache.
Yeah, it's not as much fun. I don't think it's a good idea. And then I ran into a situation where, okay, when you think about it, come on over here for a second. This is a block I did, and all of the seams are pressed to one side, traditionally pressed to one side like we are used to. Now, if I was going to quilt this, make it a pillow or whatever, and I wanted to quilt in the ditch, and we all know what that means. That means when you're quilting this, that you stitch on the low side of the seam. That means where you push the seam allowance underneath, that's the high side. So this is the high side. So you would be stitching around here and up here. So you'd be stitching on the beige. All of these would be stitched on the beige. That's where your thread would go. Now, one of the best parts about that, when you do it that way, it raises, on this part, it would raise the gold up a little bit. So it's going to give you that more dimensional look. It's what we quilt for that dimensional look. We don't want this flat thing, or we wouldn't bother.
Well, we do like them flat, but.
Well, no, we don't want them rumpled, but we want them dimensional. So if you push the seams under, you get that dimensional look. Now on this block, I went backwards and I pressed open, because I couldn't press them all open because I'd already stitched it. But I pressed these 3 long seams open. Now, the bad part about that now is that when I'm going to stitch in the ditch here, I have to determine, which is the high side. Because if you think about it, because of the fact that it's got fabric on both sides, there is no high side. So in essence, I have to stitch right down the middle of that seam. Now, one bad thing about that is if I'm stitching right in that seam, I could very easily puncture one of the threads that are going this way and break it. And then you've got a weak seam. So that's my one. I don't like having open seams. The other open seam problem, that's what?
That's number one.
That's number one. The other reason why I don't like it is on this one, when I was stitching it, I used a light gray thread because I had color and I had beige. So it was perfectly fine when you flipped it to one side, you did not see that thread line. But when you open it up, and if there's any stress on it, and I don't know if you can see that gray stitch line. You can see that thread.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. So it's because there's no way to hide it.
Right.
In essence.
You're putting more stress actually on the stitch than you would
Yes.
if you had pressed it one way or the other.
Right, your construction stitch,
Yes.
I guess you would call it. So so that's my number 2 reason why I don't like open. I think I'm on 3 right now.
I think it's
I'm
only
on 3.
2, but that's okay. We'll
No,
go for 3.
hard to press.
Oh.
You don't know
You're
what's
right.
top and high and low, and then the stitch lines should show. So my advice to you, now another reason.
And you know, the other thing is somebody probably will say, well, why didn't you use a beige thread when you do that? You're going to run into the same thing.
Right here.
Exactly. You're going to run into the same problem if you, on your colors, so using a beige thread would have been equally as problematic.
Okay. Now I had gotten this little guy out.
Oh, can I go back to your piecing? One other thing. If you were going to sew those block to block, you don't get butted seams.
Right, that's the other thing too.
That's a 4.
That's a number 4. So you can see we are rapidly against open seams. There might be some times when you
There
have to.
are ways. When you have to alleviate bulk in something, it's a good idea.
I still don't think it's that big of a deal myself.
Yeah,
but anyways,
sometimes. I mean, it depends if you have all kinds of angles coming into one spot.
Right.
You get a big lump.
But again, that's Marty is absolutely right. So if you wanted butted seams, when you're going like this,
and if the other ones were pressed open also,
right? If the other
you
one
really
was
have
like
a much
this,
harder time trying to line those seams up than you would if they're. I mean, you really have to pin them in. I'm just not a proponent of pinning.
Right. So that's what you would have, rather than your traditional nice butted seam.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
No bueno. We don't like that. Back to this. I was going to
Yes,
talk
I'm
about
sorry.
this
I
for a
just
minute.
had to go back to that one
On
point.
something like this, half the appeal to this is going to be the highs and lows of this piece, because you've got all this background and then you've got all these little pieces that you want just to pop up like little soldiers or whatever. So by doing that, and let me tell you, going back and pressing this open was a bear to do. So everybody has their opinion. That is mine. Marty agrees with me on this one. We don't always.
We wouldn't
but
have worked
sometimes we
together
do.
for 36 years if we hadn't agreed on a few things.
A few things, yeah. So that's our opinion on open seams. The other thing I want to talk about is choose your backing. And I went to grab something to try to illustrate my point of what I want to get across to you, and I couldn't find anything bad, so I couldn't find anything to show you. So I'm just going to tell you, when you have a top that you're going to quilt, make sure you think ahead of what thread you want to use on the top, and is it going to coordinate with the backing? Or if you put if you have a totally white top and you have a black printed back, if you try to put black on the bobbin, your chances are going to have pull through on the top of little black dots.
Think about this one right here. Flip it over so they can see what color it is. So this is the colors of this topper. It's called the Prairie Star Fall Topper. I would no more have put a light colored backing on this.
It wouldn't have made sense regardless.
Right,
but
it wouldn't have made sense regardless. But, I mean, if it's going to hang on the wall, sometimes you say, well, I don't care what I put on the back. But even then, you do have to care. Because if I had put a light colored backing on this, chances are would have wanted to use a light colored thread. Now, would you have wanted to see a light colored thread over all of that? I don't think so.
And a lot of us have machines that are good enough that we can adjust our tensions, so you can eliminate 99.9% of that problem. But not all of us have those machines, and there's still that 0.01%
Right.
that it's going to be a problem.
And plus, if you look at the way, I mean, yes, I did this one on the long arm, but if you look at this pattern, do you see these points? The machine actually is still stitching at the same speed unless you have a regulator. But you're getting all those little tiny, tiny stitches because you're having to slow down to make that point. And the thing is when you have small stitches, you have way more tendency of the bobbin thread popping up to the top than you do on a normal straight line.
So that would be my second tip for today. Think about it. Think ahead. Think ahead of what you're going to be doing with it. Don't just make a top and slap it back on it willy-nilly, because it could bite you in the fanny.
Use your noggin.
Yeah, so now we're going to flip the camera over, and Marty is going to give her a couple of her little tidbits.
Okay. We'll do this one first. It seems like I've been doing some bindings lately, and
A lot of bindings
lately. And that's, like I said, this one I wanted to show you. Just when I do my sewing, rather than, and I don't know if you can come in.
Do I need to come on the back side of you?
Yeah, maybe probably wouldn't be a bad idea. I think it's stormy now. No, it's so wonderful. Okay, so I've got my binding sewed on here, and just I had thought of kind of, this is a subpart B onto this whole topic. Bindings. Usually when you say to somebody, how wide do you cut your bindings? Okay, I cut it 2 1/4, I cut it 2 1/2, 2 3/4, whatever. Everybody has their own number. To me, it's very flexible, depending on the project. If I'm working like on a small thing, like Teri showed in that little project before, yeah, you want to go 2 1/2 because you want a small binding on it. You don't want a big hunkin' binding on it that's going to overpower the whole piece.
Or, excuse me while I interrupt you again, what you can do is you can, on a small piece, you can go 2 1/2 inches wide, pull it over more to the back. So still do a narrow seam allowance, but it won't be so difficult to hold on to.
Right, so you can, and I know Kim Deal, I think, does that a lot. She will take and she'll put it on, but then you can vary your seam allowance to allow for if you want a wider binding or a smaller binding. I mean, there's some people that put like 4-inch bindings on just so they can have that really big piece on the back.
Almost looks like a border.
It almost looks like an added border to the back. So it's kind of just fun. I mean, and there's some people, and I'm exaggerating this, that rather than just wrapping it like this,
I can't see because your big fake hands in the way.
I'm so sorry, will take and fold it on the edge. So you really don't look like you have a binding at all. Probably not my preference, but I know that some people do that. So that's another thought. So we did our binding on this guy, but when it comes to the hand stitching, what I will do, I mean, and some people use the binding clips. I always find they get in my way, but it's a personal preference at that point.
I have to show you what I do. This is so stupid. I'm going to try to do this with my hand. You have your other hand here, right here. What I do is I take my underneath my fingernails and I run it right down that seam.
Yep.
And I can't do it and hold on. Put your hand over here. Okay.
Because I do the same thing. So you want to take, and I've got my fingernail almost in that seam allowance.
Right.
And I'll take and I'll pull it. So
you're
they're
almost
like a
pressing.
pressing it.
Yeah.
So that you have it so that it's going to be nice and flat and no little ridges on the other side. I do the exact same thing.
Must be Mom taught us that. Do you think?
Oh, I don't know. Or we're both smart people. One or the
It
other.
could be. I doubt it.
So, Terry convinced me a very long time ago to use a very small needle when I'm doing my bindings. And I have to admit, it does work better.
Not short.
No, you use an applique 10.
Yes. Longer but thin diameter.
But it's a nice thin, so it really glides through your fabric very nice. And very honestly, so that's what it's these applique 10. So they're a longer needle, but they're fine. And with this goes this.
Yes.
And if you haven't ever seen this, maybe we'll demo that right at the very end just to show you what those are, because those are like a freaking godsend. So I've got this held in my hand. And normally when you're sewing your binding, okay, so my thread is coming out here. So I'm coming right underneath it, and I'm taking my stitch.
Make sure you don't go through the front.
Well, I'm feeling with my finger
Right,
underneath. That's what this finger is all about. So I'm, again, where it comes out, I'm going right underneath it and then taking a stitch. You can do this, you know.
I know, but I didn't want to say your
My fat fingers are in the way?
No, your anatomy is in the way.
Oh, my boob. Okay. So then we're going, so that's what I do it. But what I have found over the years is what I do is I will pull it out just a little way, take another stitch. So I'm actually doing 2 at a time. So rather than pull, stitch, pull it out, what I'll do is take my stitch, just pull it out enough to get my needle turned, and take 2. So I'm actually really only pulling it out full way every other one. And
You're going twice as fast.
Well, I'm not going twice as fast, I don't think, but it does. I think mentally it helps me out, because I think what it is that I'm going farther is what my hand is saying. Oh, sure, now I got a knot in it. So that's one of the things that I do with that, with the bindings and then the cut. So the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about today, we'll get the cough out of the way. Say, for instance, you got a kit and it has a lot of different fabrics in it. And like this one, this was Lakewood, and we're popping this one. I thought we already had this on the website, and it wasn't. And it's such a pretty quilt.
Okay, hang on. I got to get this back.
Yeah,
there we go. Okay.
So this is Lakeside. This is a kit that we were doing. It's a batik kit. Finished size is 95 by 95 on this one. But as you can see, this is all batiks. And if you look at
this is what the quilt looks like.
That's what the
Sorry,
quilt
I
looks.
was fussing with the size.
I know, I'm sorry.
Don't mess with that with me anymore, ever.
So you can see the fabrics on this, and some of them are pretty darn close to each other. Make sure you pull it right out of the box, so that you can kind of see. I mean, you've got the backgrounds. I want to get down to some of the other ones. But you can see, like, some of these fabrics are very close. And then when you go to your instructions, so they give you, okay, so there's your fabric chart, which is cool. But how do you tell that one from that one? I mean, these are color copies. There's going to be some inconsistencies with it. So then here you've got fabric AB all the way through, and you're like, okay, you get down to, in our kits, we've put them in the order that they come, but once you start cutting and they start getting messed up, how do you remember which fabric is which?
And traditionally, you would take a little 1/4-inch swatch,
Little swatch
and tape it to
and
the...
onto your
yes.
fabric page, you would tape.
Not with batiks.
But it's not going to make a difference.
Not with batiks.
It's not going to make a difference. So what? And I was talking about this with a friend of ours the other day, and we came up with a fabulous solution. Actually, I think she was the one that came up with it. So thank you,
Kathy.
So what I would do? Okay, so this is fabric A. So when I'm cutting this, I would go ahead and so I've got I'm cutting on this end. I've got getting this all ready. What I do is you go to the other end and you take a magic marker.
Permanent marker.
And obviously with beak teeth, it doesn't matter.
And don't do it so if it soaks through, don't do it.
You do an A. So now you know this is fabric A, but it's on the opposite end of what you're cutting, so you're not going to cut it off until you actually get there, and then by then you're done anyways.
And you've memorized them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe.
My brain's not that good. But anyways, so that's a way that you can mark your fabric on a kit that the fabrics are really close, or any of them that has multiple fabrics, or they're not the same as the picture, that you can go ahead and mark your fabric so that you know what's what down the road. So I think those were my two.
I wanted you, Marty, are we done with this?
Yeah, I think so.
Would you hold that star thing up, because it's a nice fall project, and
let me get this out of the way. Oh, this star top. I already know where I'm putting this at home, because I think this is coming to my house. Because I have a drop leaf table in my front hall, and this is going diagonally on it. It'll just be gorgeous.
Oh, that would be perfect, yeah.
With one of the wooden bowls with some bittersweet or some nice smelly potpourri in it. Potpourri. But wouldn't that be pretty on a table? Whoops. Going that way.
Very nice. Now this one is on the website?
Yes, this is the Fall Prairie Star topper.
Because there's 4 different ones.
Yes, well, there's the patriotic. There's a Christmas one that I don't think is on yet.
It doesn't. Yeah, we'll have to look.
I think it is there. It is there. And just in case none of you have ever used them before.
Oh, the needle threader.
Oh, there it is, needle threader. Okay.
These are called desk needle threaders. This
Yes.
particular one is made by Clover. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
We hit the wrong button, so we'll just have a little splice in this. So when you're using these desktop needle threaders, I like them because they're labeled. This is your cutter, so when you're cutting it off from your thread, there's a, sure if I had a bigger piece of thread.
Well, I was going to say.
Cutter there. And then you take your fabric and you wrap it in there. And I
I got to try to make it bigger.
Okay. So you want
to put my needle in first.
Oh, whichever. It doesn't really make a difference. So you want to kind of bring it towards the little handle in the front. And the nice thing about this is the only thing you really need to see is which end of the needle your eye is on. You don't need to see it to thread anything. So that's my eye. The eye goes down in the needle slot. I usually sometimes just give it a shake because sometimes they don't land quite rightly. So again, threads towards that, but do not hold on to them, because if you hold on to them, it doesn't work. So I'm going to give that a good pop, and do you see how my thread twitched? So when you pull it up, you have a nice little loop there that you can pull through your needle, and voila, it is threaded. So desktop needle threaders, wonderful, wonderful things for those of us that are seeing impaired.
It doesn't even matter. Sometimes the thread is just fatter than the hole, and it's hard to get it in there.
Right, and there are certain needles that they don't like. I think that, what is it, long-eyed needles or something like that. I'm not sure. But if you're doing like applique needles, those will work just absolutely fine. Okay, so I think that is our 2.
Okay, I'm going to just scan around because I want to, and we're going to try an experiment at the end. We may just stop it, but remind everybody about the fall and the new fall ones we did. Because I was going to see it's a dark day.
We didn't see the treat bags last time.
Okay, so go ahead and turn it off. We'll see if this works. Oh, the other light's on, so it doesn't matter. Well, run, Marty, run.
Oh, God, Marty, go.
Run, Forrest, run. We'll see if these little doggers just light right up. Yeah, not enough. No, there we go. There we go. Okay, that's all. We just wanted to have one little cutie at the end. Okay, we'll see you next week. We'll have a few more, believe it or not, a few more fall things next week. Bye. oops, we forgot one thing. So here's another tack on. We put another new 25 bolts on our $8 yard fabric. And for those of you who haven't gotten last week's, I'm mailing as fast as my little fingers can get. So yes, that's on its way. But yeah, there'll be 25 new ones. So take a look.
Fabulous fabric findings.
Fabulous fabric findings. Okay, that's it this time for sure.